Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. This block is called B-Line, and it finishes at 12 inches. Here's the diagram. It consists of these corner beam or kite units and the half rectangle triangles, or sometimes they're called split rectangles. Here's what the block looks like if you put 4 blocks together, block to block. Gives it a little 3D or curvy effect. The first patches are for the corner beam or the kite unit. I'm going to call it the kite unit from now on. We'll make 4 each of these. Patch A1 is the center, the kite part, and patch A2 and A3 are these side parts. This tells you how much fabric to cut for each one. And that should work for the paper piecing, if you have the corner beam template from Studio 180, or if you use your AccuQuilt dies. I have included the paper piecing foundations. There are 4 on a sheet, so you'll need to make 2 copies if you're going to paper piece. Patch B is a 1.5 inch by 3 inch finished half rectangle triangle, or sometimes it's called a split rectangle. There are 3 ways to make this as well. You'll have the rotary cutting the oversized rectangles. If you're using this method, you cut 5 inches by 3 inch rectangles, cut them in half on the diagonal, and cut them in this direction. You'll need 8 patches of the background and 8 patches of the floral fabric or the dark fabric. You can use the Rex tool from the Tri-Rex set, and here are the instructions for that, or you can use the AccuQuilt dies for that. Patch C is a 1.5 inch by 3 inch finished rectangle. You'll cut 3.5 inches by 2 inch rectangles, and you'll need 8 patches of the background. There are no AccuQuilt dies for cutting this. Here are the fabrics I've chosen. This is for the kite units, 2 different accent fabrics. This is for the split rectangles or the half rectangle triangle. And if you're using the method to make the triangles bigger and trim them down, you'll trim your freezer paper to 1.5 inches by 3 inches, and you'll use that to add your seam allowances and trim your oversized half rectangle triangles. And here is patch C, the rectangles. Step 1, we're going to piece 8 of these kite units. And if you're not familiar with that, stay tuned for a short tutorial that will show you how. First, you make sure that you have the pieces in the right spot. These are easy to confuse because you can turn them like this, and that almost looks like it should work, but this is poking out here, and that won't work. So we turn these around like this. And how I remember it is, if you're not looking at the picture, but I do suggest you look at the diagrams on this page. Everything, all the small points end in this corner. So if you have it turned like this, that's big. It doesn't end at the same corner. So this goes here because they start off big and it ends small here in the corner. The other thing is it makes a square. So this is sort of a square with all the seam allowances on it. I start with one side and flip it over. Then this little cutout here at the bottom, you match this little cutout here, and then pick this up and match the edge. Match that edge there. Stitch your 1/4 inch from here all the way to the bottom. Here's the stitching. It starts here and goes all the way through here. Now I'll just press the seams open. Now we press the seams open, and here's what it looks like. If I zoom into this corner, you see these don't meet. There are the little pieces sticking out here, and that's okay because when we sew the 2 together, we'll have a nice little point here for this corner beam to make a nice little point. Now we'll take this other part and stitch it. You flip it over, and you match this little part here, that straight part that was cut off, and you match this edge here. and then stitch your 1/4 of an inch all the way down and press the seams open. And here's your finished unit. Right now it measures 3.5 inches. It will be a 3-inch finished unit. So if you're using AccuQuilt, you sew everything together just like this. There's 16 of these units in the block. And what I did before I sewed these, I cut everything out. Then I separated everything into 4 stacks, and I laid them out just like this to make sure I had all the pieces cut correctly. All right, now we're going to do the paper piecing demo. On page 2 of your instructions is a sheet of 4 of these paper piecing foundations. You'll need to make 4 copies of the page because you'll need a total of 16 of these squares. When you print it, be sure you set your printer settings to actual size. And this square should measure 3.5 inches both ways. We have our 4-inch squares cut for the corner beam. We're going to use that. And then we're going to pretend this is 28 inches long because I'm just doing one demo here. It's by 28 inches. Fold it in half with the wrong sides together. Next we'll cut a square. And take this square, cut it in half on the diagonal. And when you do that, you'll have your left and your right sides. You'll have 2 of them, enough for 2 units. If you look at this paper piecing foundation, the outside is a lighter line. This outside line is the cut line. And when you cut the papers out, cut just outside that line, maybe about 1/8 of an inch. The inside lines, the dark, thick lines, are all sewing lines. So this is what we'll sew. When we sew the units together, we'll be using this outside line. And when we're doing the paper piecing, we'll be using these 2 lines here. Now your copy is corrected. This is A1. This is the corner beam unit, patch A1. This is A2 and this is A3. And that is the piecing order. So we start with A1, A2, then A3. Now we'll take our corner beam fabric, the 4-inch square, flip it over so the wrong side is up. And we're going to put it on like this. Now what I like to tell people in paper piecing, this is the back of the piece. Once you're finished, this will be on the back, and underneath here, this will be the front of the unit. And I call this the road map because it tells you what you're going to do next and where you're going. So right now we're at A1 and we're going to be headed to A2 and then we'll go to A3. So if after you've pieced something and you bring it back and you're looking at something like this, you don't know what to do next, remember you need your road map to tell you where to go. So if you flip it over, you'll know this is what you need to do next. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you're new to paper piecing and you get confused on the step, because there's a few steps, but they all start to repeat after a while. So the first thing we're going to do is I take this is Elmer's washable glue stick, and I'm going to turn this over and put some glue underneath this A1 section. You can see through the paper, and so you know where you're putting the glue. Turn it over and then glue it down. And remember, we're gluing this to the wrong side of the fabric. So we're at A1 and we want to travel now to A2. So that's this direction. And we put this where the line is facing away from us. Take a ruler, or sometimes a cardboard or a piece of paper, and I'm putting the edge of the ruler on this line. This is the line between A1 and A2. And I take and fold it up, just put a crease in it at the line. And then I'm going to fold this up like that. Take your ruler with your 1/4 of an inch mark, and you want to put the 1/4 of an inch mark right on that fold line. It's right on the fold line. Now we're going to cut this off right here. So what we're doing there is we're adding a 1/4 of an inch so we'll know where to place our fabric. Now if you can see in the video, you can see through this paper, and if you're experienced you probably don't need to do this, but This is the outside thin line, and I want to mark that line. I'm just going to mark it with my pencil. So there's the mark, and here's the extra that you cut around with. And all this area under here needs to be covered by the next fabric we put down. We're going to use this one next. So we pick this up and put this fabric down. This is A2, and with the right side facing up. Then this edge we just cut, we're going to line up with this edge. And we want to make sure that this point falls somewhere in here. So let me do that. Just match these. Now I can see that I've got my fabric is coming down this way underneath. So I'm going to hold my finger here and then lift this up. And I can see I'm right at the edge here. So that means I need to move this over. So let's just scooch this over a little bit. This is still covered over here. And I'm putting my finger here, lift this up. And you see that there's plenty of fabric underneath there. You take the glue and glue this. I'll just go ahead and do that. Just put a dab or two of glue and hold it down, and it's glued. Now it's not going anywhere. Take this to your machine and flip this over. You'll start stitching a few stitches off of this line and stitch on this line, and then take a few stitches off the line. You'll want to lower your stitch length so you'll have more stitches per inch, and it's easier to tear the paper off. Now here's our stitching. You see we started here off of the line, stitched on the line, and stitched a little bit off of the line. Now we turn this over, and we're going to press this up. The one that you just sewed on, you press it up like this. Okay, so now it's pressed. And what you want to do now is to look and see that everything, there's fabric underneath all of this. And we see there is plenty up here. It gets really close here and plenty down here. And that's good. We're good to go on this side. Now the only line we have left is this line. So we turn it around. And this is facing away from us, this line. Take your ruler, fold it up, and put your crease in it. And fold it back this way. And put your ruler up to cut off your 1/4 of an inch. Now you're ready for your next fabric. And you put it down like that, match the top. And then check again that you have enough fabric underneath here. So I'm going to scooch this over. You can put your glue on there if you want. Just a couple of dabs. Hold that down. And you'll take this to the machine and do the same thing. You'll start a few stitches away from the line, stitch on the line, and stop a few stitches away from the line. And there's our stitches, off, on the line, and stitch off. Now we'll flip this over and press this that way. Now you have this odd looking piece of fabric. So flip it over and look at your road map, and you're going to trim it on the outside edge. I like to put my 1/4 inch mark on this line and then trim it. It's easier to line up this thick line with the 1/4 inch line here. So if we do that, just line it up and then trim it off. And then do that to all 4 sides. And there is your unit. I always start in the corner just to hold down this side and then peel it away like this. And then that loosens up this edge. And then tear it against, you tear against the stitches. Now they're all ready. This is one that was paper pieced, and this is one that was done with AccuQuilt. The kite units are done. So step 2, we're going to piece the half rectangle triangles or the split rectangles. And coming up is a short tutorial that shows you 3 different ways to piece these. Half rectangle triangles have a left side and a right side. I have placed these fabrics right sides up and cut this half rectangle triangle. I'm going to cut another one just so we'll have two. Take these apart, we see that they're facing the same direction. And when you put these together, this is what they look like. So these were cut right sides up. We take this piece and we cut it with the right sides down. Let's do that and we'll see what it looks like. And we turn these over and you'll see they face the other direction. Or if we turn them this way, they face in this direction. So there's a left and a right side. And these go together like this. They look the same how they are now, but they're very different. Once you sew them together, they have that orientation that they're either left or right facing. So you need to be mindful of that when you're doing your cutting. The first method we're going to use to make the half rectangle triangles is to cut rectangles that are slightly oversized, and we'll sew them together and then trim them down to the correct size. There's a chart you can download in the description below the video that gives you all the sizes you need to cut for the various finished sizes of half rectangle triangles. For this example, we'll be making 8 half rectangle triangles. 4 will be left facing and 4 will be right facing. I've cut my rectangles 3 inches by 6 inches, and I want a 2 inch by 4 inch finished half rectangle triangle. I have 2 background rectangles and 2 accent rectangles in this stack, and the same here. So we have 8 rectangles all together. I'm going to take this stack and turn it over so the right sides are facing down, and this has the right sides facing up. I'll take my ruler and cut a diagonal line, and since we have half of the fabrics facing up and half facing down, it really doesn't matter which angle you use. And I cut all of these along the diagonal. And let's open them up and see what we have. These are like this. These are all the right sides, I'll call these. And now these are the left sides. 2 of those. And then we should have the same number in this stack. Now all these are facing right sides up now. Okay. We'll take these 2 stacks and sew them together like this, and these 2 like that. And so you see that they're facing in different directions. On the light fabric, we're going to turn them over, and on this long angle, we're going to mark our 1/4 inch seam allowance. We don't need to mark the entire line, just need to mark the ends. I'm taking a ruler that has a 1/4 inch line. It's a dashed line, and I'll take that 1/4 inch and lay it just at the bottom of this fabric. Reason I'm doing that is when I mark with my pencil this 1/4 inch line here and here, it will give me closer to a 1/4 inch. If I move this up any, and you can see the fabric from underneath this line, then my 1/4 inch line will be more than a 1/4 inch. So place it at the bottom, and we'll take a pencil and just mark on these 2 sides. That's really all you need to mark is the ends. And these are what we want to sew together. This is my marked one. Turn this over. Here's our marked line on this side. I want to line up the edge of the fabric here, and then where this line reaches the edge of the fabric, I want that to be the edge of this fabric underneath. So that point points to where the two fabrics intersect at the line, or at the bottom. And I'll just put a little pin in here right now. And then we'll move this up and line this up. We want to match this edge here. This doesn't come out as close to the edge, but for this one, since we've oversized the cuts, we're just going to start here and stitch 1/4 inch all the way down. Here we have our piece stitched, and you see the stitching comes right here at this angle where the two fabrics meet at the edge of the fabric. And then this is just stitched off 1/4 inch. Now we'll press the seams open. The seams have been pressed open, and I'm not going to cut off these nubs right now. Take a piece of freezer paper, and it's cut 2 inches by 4 inches, which is the finished size that I want. I'm going to place it on the front side of this piece, matching this corner of the freezer paper with the seam line, and this corner of the freezer paper with the seam line. So we just move it around until all the diagonals match, and you want to make sure you have at least 1/4 inch all the way around this freezer paper. Then go to the iron and press it. Give it a quick press and it'll stick to the fabric. Now the freezer paper is pressed onto the fabric. We'll take a ruler with 1/4 inch markings on it and lay the edge. The 1/4 inch marking lines in this case are the dashed lines here and here. Place the dashed lines right on the freezer paper. So line up the dashed lines here with the freezer paper edges. And then you'll trim. Trim these two sides. And you'll see the freezer paper now has 1/4 inch seam allowance around these two sides. Flip it over and do the same thing on this other side. And then take the freezer paper off. On these edges here, the seam line doesn't go into the corner because that's what you need when you're piecing these two other patches. Your 1/4 inch will end up right here on this seam line, so you'll have your seams starting and ending right in the corner in the intersections of those two pieces. You can reuse this freezer paper many times. Just don't press it for a long time. It just needs a quick little dab, and it holds it on long enough for you to trim it. The second method for piecing half rectangle triangles is to use a rectangle ruler. In this case, I'm using the Rex tool, which is part of the Tri-Rex ruler set. Any ruler that's designed for split rectangles or for half rectangle triangles you can use with this method. I have my two pieces of fabric, and again you have to be mindful of which way the fabrics are going. Are you cutting them with right sides up or wrong sides up? You just place the ruler. In this case we're placing it on the 4.5 inch mark of this strip, and we'll cut. On these special rulers, you will have a little notch that needs to be cut out. It's very tiny, but that's what it looks like. That notch will come in handy when we're piecing them together. To piece these, you're going to piece like this, flip this over, and let's look at the notch we just cut. This is the notch we cut off. So you match this notch with the bottom edge of this fabric, and these edges of the fabrics you'll match. So you have it matched here and here. And then move this over and line up the rest of this. You'll start and just stitch 1/4 inch. Here is the stitching. It's stitched 1/4 inch. And as long as you're lined up, everything will come out fine. So I'm going to go press this open and show you what it looks like. Here it is pressed open. You'll notice here there's a little notch, and that's perfectly fine. This is where when you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance, it will be taken in, and then your 1/4 inch here, And your seam line will end up right in the corner when you sew the two pieces together. Cut off this nub. And that's what it looks like. And here's the top part, the same way. Go ahead and cut off that nub, and then you're finished. The third method for making half rectangle triangles is to use the AccuQuilt cutting system. In the cube companion angles, you'll have the side pieces, and they're always shape 14 that will do these. These are usually used for the triangle and square. These are the sides. And they do make some other sizes that you can buy separate dies. I'll have a link to those in the description below the video, and they'll also be in the handout for the first part of this, the sizes to cut the oversized rectangle. So you'll have a download link, and you'll have a link directly to AccuQuilt for that. So one thing you have to remember for this AccuQuilt die, it has the two sides, and they will be facing the same way once you cut them. So if we wanted to make two of these in one direction and two of these in the other direction, this is what we'll need. We'll put these on the die right sides up, and we'll put these on the die right sides down. And then I'll go cut these and show you what they look like. I've cut them, and now I'll take off this excess pieces here, and we'll take the pieces off. So we have a stack of this and a stack of that. These are wrong sides up. So now we'll put them right sides up, and then these are the right sides up that were cut. So these are the sets you get. You'll have two facing in left and two facing right. And now to piece these, they'll go together like this. So we'll flip this over and match this part down here. You want to match this long edge, and then this cut off edge here. Just line it up even here and even here. And then I always put my finger on it and slide it up. Finish lining up this edge, and then this lines up here a little bit. And you'll stitch 1/4 inch all the way down. Here is the stitching. See, these match here and up here. And then here's what it looks like once it's pressed. These are your little extra edges on the side that will be taken up in the seam allowance, and over here too, like this. And with the AccuQuilt, there are no nubs to cut off. So those are the 3 ways you can make half rectangle triangles. The split rectangles are done, and now we take the rectangle, background rectangle, and sew it onto each of the split rectangles like this. Press the seams open. All the units are done. Now we just take the proppet board and lay out all the units for our block. And now we just sew the units into rows. We'll have 4 rows, and then press the seams open and then sew the rows together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.